Hello everyone, this is El Spectra. Welcome back to the Land of Empires. And in this video, I want to review the 7 Titanos that currently exist in this game. And I think this is a good time to release this review because we have recently received the introduction of the Celestial Stag, which is the most recent Titanos that was released about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. And it's quite powerful. But before I arrive at the Celestial Tag, I will go back to the beginning in Season 1, where players are introduced to Bloodshade, which is the so-called free-to-play Titanos, as well as the Moonbane, which is basically the kind of pay-to-win early game Titanos. So the way I'll review these Titanos is I will talk a little bit about their stats, their skills, their role in the meta within the season that they're introduced in. So Bloodshade and Moonbane are introduced in season 1. By season 2, you can purchase Nightsaber. By season 3, you can purchase Odin. In season 4, actually I believe in season 5, you can purchase Windstrider. In season 6, Chaos. And finally in season 7, you can purchase the Celestial Stag. So I will talk about their power and their relevancy in the season that they exist in, as well as in later seasons. Because surprisingly, some Titanos, although they get outscaled in terms of stats, still play quite a significant role in later seasons. So now with the introductions over, let's dive straight into the first Titanos, which is Bloodshade, I think. Yeah, Bloodshade. I have a hard time recollecting the name of this Titanos, even though I've used it quite often, especially back when I was first introduced. Back then, we didn't really have too many Titanos to work with, so we kind of stuck with Nightshade and Moonbane for a very long time. But nowadays, they are introduced per different seasons, so players would cycle through these Titanos relatively quickly. So the first Titanos we'll review is Nightshade, and I like to bundle kind of Nightshade, Moonbane, and the dog Titanos together, Nightsaber together, because they have a specific characteristic in terms of the stats that they provide. And that characteristic is that the stat they provide is actually limited to defense and HP prior to resonance. And this is quite important because especially in the early game where player stats are typically low, the Titanos stats actually add a huge portion to the to the stats that you're working with during combat. And we can see, at least in terms of Nightsaber, funnily enough, these stats were actually much higher back when Nightsaber was first introduced. However, I guess the developers thought that these stats were too high for free-to-play, so these stats were unfortunately nerfed down to, I guess, 10%. Because I guess originally all of these stats were 60%. So upon resonating Bloodshade, we can see that going from defense to HP, we are introduced with attack and ferocity, but only 10%. So you're only really getting a 10% boost across all stats for doing the resonance for Bloodshade. But after all, Bloodshade is free to play, so extra stats is extra stats. I cannot really complain about it. Damage-wise, the 2,400% number, I'm really not too sure how much impact this has in Season 1, but I can tell you that this number is absolutely irrelevant to anything. So don't even pay attention to this number. At the start of the battle, improve defense of all troops by 15% for 10 seconds. Now this is actually kind of decent because it is, after all, a stat improvement. It's better than nothing. It's probably an additive improvement, meaning that it doesn't really do much, so it will just increase your defense percentage by 15%. And it only lasts for first 10 seconds. So it's better than nothing, but at the end of the day, I really don't think this stat does anything. And the most essential part of maxing Bloodshade, I wish they had the name somewhere in this screen, so that I don't have to always try to remember what this drag or each Titanos is actually called. But this skill, it increases healing speed by 30% and hospital capacity by 4,000. Now keep in mind that hospital capacity is tied directly to your valor, and your valor is 4 times the size of your hospital. So by increasing your hospital capacity by 4,000, you're allowing more troops to be stored within your valor when the moment necessitates. And it increases your healing speed by 30%, which is always very useful, because I think ever since season 4, where Glorious 10 is released, there is really no way of actually boosting your healing percent, so healing speed. I think healing speed isn't even related to Glorious. I think healing speed is probably completely capped within season 1. A majority of healing speed just comes from research and some Titanos skills, and that's about it, I think. So 30% is not super impactful because your base healing speed is around 900%. If you use your alliance skill, it's about 1,000%, but it is still a nice 3% boost to that 1,000%, and it really goes a long way, because you'll always be fighting, and healing troops is really the essence of combat in this game. And once we compare Bloodshade to Moonbane, which is the initial pay-to-win Titanos, we can really see the difference in stats. Now, pre-resonance, the difference isn't actually that big. You have 75% attack, 75% ferocity, compared to, if you recall, 50% defense and 50% HP. Now, there is not too much a distinction between attack, ferocity, and defense and HP, since they are just basic multipliers within combat. So I would consider attack plus ferocity kind of the same as defense and HP. But within those stats, you have about a 25% increase in those respective stats. So without before resonance, Moonbane is quite a bit better than Bloodshade, simply due to that 25% increase in the stats that it provides. However, once you resonate it, this is where the contrast really shows itself. So instead of Bloodshade's very sad 10% attack and ferocity, as we saw earlier, Moonbane actually provides an 85% stat boost across all stat categories. So attack, defense, HP, and ferocity. And this is what really makes Moonbane super meta relevant within season 1. Because in season 1, players are working with 300%, 400% stats. The top players might be working with 500% stats, but unless they invest super heavily into Lord power, they won't really be seeing stats much higher than that. So from a 500% stat standpoint, an 85% boost towards all stat types is a huge boost towards your combat performance. And therefore, if you are well, Moonbane is definitely top priority for maxing in the early game. And maxing Titanos, honestly, I'm not too sure about the situation within the early seasons, but looking at the packs that we're receiving from these special events, like special bundles where you can buy, I'm not too sure if it's available right now, but there are special bundles where you could buy these Titanos materials that's a little bit more cheaper than straight up from the shop. But overall, it costs about $2,200 to rush a Titanos to max within about a month. So for Wells, that could be a very beneficial investment, and Moonbane will be heavily relied upon until probably season 5. So it is not a bad investment at all. So now going to his skills. His first skill, it deals 3,080 damage to target troops plus 11% extra damage. Now, I'm not too sure what this 11% does, but similar story with Bloodshade, the 3080 damage isn't really impactful. And although this skill may be relevant in season 1 through 2, like the moment Odin hits, this damage will be completely irrelevant. His second skill, at the start of battle, improve HP of all troops by 20% for 10 seconds. Now, unfortunately, this looks to be another just static addition to the HP. It's a little better than Bloodshade's, but this kind of reeks of Season 1 skill design. Not necessarily in a bad way, because Season 7, I think it's got its own problems, although there's its own upsides as well. But we can see that the stat boost in Season 1 is very weak. But really, its third skill is what is really incredible about this Titanos. It is actually the only Titanos that increases training speed, and not by a negligible amount either. It increases training speed by 20% and expedition capacity by 2,000. Now, the definition of expedition capacity is basically your march capacity. And this also is attributed in your rally capacity. So your rally capacity is like a sum of your rally capacity plus your march capacity, something like that. So this mostly influences your march capacity. And as everyone knows, the bigger the army you hit with, the stronger it will be. So 2,000 is a very decent boost, especially in Season 1, where increasing your march capacity has very limited options. So yeah, Odin, oh my god, what's this name? Moonbane is probably one of the best Titanos you can invest in when you're starting the game. But if, for example, somehow you join an old server and you're already in Season 3, then just slowly raise Moonbane, and for the sake of its third skill only, because it's not going to be really helping you all that much. And like, especially its first and second skill, that's going to have almost zero relevance in combat, but its third skill is still worth getting. And you can farm this dragon slowly as a free-to-play, I think starting from Season 5. So starting from Season 5, you can summon Moonbane for free, and there are many free-to-play options to raise these earlier Titanos. And starting from Season 6, I think you get Nightsaber for free, and starting from Season 7, you get Odin for free. Anyways, now we move on to Nightsaber, which is released in Season 2. And first and foremost, it's not worth maxing. I really don't think Nightsaber is worth maxing, because Nightsaber, in my opinion, still is kind of tied to that early season Titanos design. The first skill deals 60% damage to the target and increases damage taken by 5% for 10 seconds. Now this is actually not a bad skill, I think. However, the damage taken is rather relatively small, so 5% for only 10 seconds. And second of all, it just doesn't do much damage. Its second skill, at the start of the battle, it improves all troops' HP by 15% and ferocity by 7.5% for 12 seconds. I think this skill is absolute shit, especially for Season 2, because it is just an addition to the stats and it really doesn't do anything. And his third skill, it increases expedition capacity by 3,000 and rally capacity by 3,500. Now, here is the reason why I would suggest raising Nightsaber, but maybe not maxing it. Because if you take a look at the stats, it's not really different from Moonbane. It is not the stark contrast between Moonbane and Bloodshade, because with Bloodshade, you have relatively no stats at all. So that is kind of what the free-to-plays are provided with. So the whales, they must have some alternative way of gaining those huge stats, which comes in the form of resonated Moonbane. However, if we take a look at Nightsaber, we can see that the stats only grow from 85% to 86.25%, so a 1.25% increase. And in terms of HP, we go from 85% to 112%, which is a relatively small increase given that we are now in Season 2. And that is really the difference. After each season, the game will really focus, like the support from Titanos, will really be less about the stats and more about the skills that they provide. Of course, stats matter as well, but it is really no longer worth the expense of rushing to max, which costs $2,200 if you want to do it within a month. If you want to rush it within 1 or 2 weeks, you can do that. It will cost you around $3,500. But if you want to kind of slow farm it over the course of like 3-4 months, it will only cost you a couple $100. So yeah, this is a game that values your time. The longer you play, the longer you make these low investments, the stronger you will be in the long run without having to invest all that much. So you'll only be getting about a 13% like a 37% increase in HP and ferocity compared to Moonbane. I think that's right. Uh, Not even like a 28% increase. So it's even less than I initially thought. But yeah, once again, when it comes to Moonbane, Nightsaber, and Bloodshade, before Resonance, the stats that they provide, they really suck. You can see that Nightsaber doesn't even give the defense and attack boost before he is resonated. And this is one of the reasons whenever I run a rally, I never want to see any non-resonated Nightsaber, non-resonated Moonbane. And it will become clear once I start covering Odin, because Odin actually provides all four stat. Odin provides all growth in all four stat types prior to resonance, and this is why I enjoy seeing Titanos from Odin or higher compared to non-resonated Titanos coming before Odin. Yeah. So stats, they still matter, because rather than looking at those 28% marginal gains, we are losing out on 100% of stats if the Titanos is not resonated. So the skill itself, it's, I think, relatively decent. You have your expedition capacity by 3,000 and your rally capacity by 35,000. The rally capacity is less important, but the 3,000 expedition capacity is nice at the end of the day. So I would suggest similar to Moonbane, for those who are not rushing it, just slowly work on Nightsaber, eventually get it to level 200. You can see my Nightsaber is level 200 with level 20 skills. And actually, by the time Odin was released, my Nightsaber was only at level 140. And ever since then, I never invested a single cent in Nightsaber. It was grown from level 140 to level 200, all through free-to-play resources. So yeah, it is definitely a good option to slowly raise, and you'll eventually be able to get it to level 200 through the free-to-play resources that I mentioned. Of course, you never want to resonate Nightsaber unless you are a super whale who has no issues spending over $2,000 maxing Nightsaber. If you do max him, then he will be a very nice asset to you until probably Season 5. And in Season 5, I think most people will be running either Windstrider, Odin plus Moonbane, or Windstrider, Odin plus Nightsaber. And if you can do one or the other, why do both? Like imagine you max both Titanos. In Season 3, you'll still be quite happy because you have 3 Titanos to use compared to the peasants who only have maxed Odin, and they will have to rely on Bloodshade for their third team. However, by Season 5, the meta will completely change and your Nightsaber will be kind of worthless. So now we move on to Odin. And Odin is really the first, what I would call, powerful Titanos. And powerful, the first reason why I say Odin is powerful is because of the stats it provides before resonance. And we can see that it provides all 4 different stat types. And this is really, really, really useful for everyone that is not a super whale. Because Titanos can be grown relatively quickly through free-to-play means. And if you are not a whale, or low spender means, I should say. And if you are not a whale, it is a very good option just to slowly work on them, and they will provide you with a lot of utility even when they are not maxed. So even before they reach resonance, they will provide you with a lot of utility in contrast to every Titanos coming before Odin. So now we take a look at Odin's skills. His first skill is to strike all surrounding enemy troops 3 times in a row for 20%, 30%, and 40% damage respectively. Now this skill actually seems quite decent in terms of, first of all, dealing damage. And yeah, just dealing damage basically. It deals decent damage both in the Battle of Disorder and outside of the Battle of Disorder. His second skill is to increase all melee troops' HP by 18% and unit defense by 18% from the start to the end of the battle. And this is kind of the first skill that isn't restricted by some kind of timer. And overall, I think this skill is pretty good. It is still actually a mystery what exactly makes Odin super good in a battle of disorder. Some players speculate that it is this skill. Maybe the battle of disorder has a separate multiplier for buffs provided by Titanos. Some people speculate that it is this skill because in the battle of disorder, a lot of skills are nerfed, and maybe people are speculating that this skill isn't so much nerfed, and it deals a lot of damage to the frontline forces, which is the main force in the battle of disorder. And his third skill is to increase healing speed by 20% and rally capacity by 40,000. Now, unfortunately, this is one of the worst passive skills across all the Titanos, but I think Odin's other beneficial aspects makes it worth getting and maybe even rushing to max. If you rush to max, the stat that it provides is not significantly higher than Nightsaber, but overall, I think that Odin is widely used even in Season 7, and it provides a lot of utility both in the Battle of Disorder and outside of the Battle of Disorder. Mostly within the Battle of Disorder. But yeah, we really don't know what makes it so strong in a Battle of Disorder, but it's just what it is. People prefer using Odin over Windstrider, especially Chaos. So it has a lot of longevity. That's all I can say about it. And the stat that it provides before Resonance is not bad. It provides 80% stats across all 4 types and a little more in attack and ferocity. So Odin will be available for free-to-plays, I think within Season 7. So there's no longer any excuse for free-to-play to not join a rally with a decent Titanos. One strategy you can use is that across the earlier seasons, I think starting from Season 5, you can start farming the Odin level materials. So you have these items. I'm not too sure what they're called, but these items you get from the daily quest, and these are mostly for upgrading Odin. You really do not want to use these materials, which I believe you can only get 10 of per day, to upgrade other Titanos. So one viable strategy for free-to-play is to save those materials, which you can gain 10 from every day, until you get Odin for free. And you get these Titanos for free from the cauldron. I'm not too sure what the specific name is, but let's see if I could find the chest. So yeah, from the cauldron, if you log in for 7 days, you can see that I can summon Moonbane, Nightsaber, or Odin from the chest instead of summoning a migration drawing or 20 cents of time, which is pretty useless in the context of Season 7. So definitely use this scroll to summon Odin, and then once you summon Odin, you can benefit from all the materials that you've saved to probably push Odin to almost level 200, I would dare say. Anyways, let's move on to Windstrider. So Windstrider, it offers a bit higher stats than Odin, and when maxed, it offers about, marginally higher stats. And this is why you can see none of my Titanos are really maxed, and I never really spend all that much on each Titanos. The way I get Titanos is to just buy the discount bundle, which is here, special discounts. Once you buy this bundle, you can get 2,000 of each material in addition to what you get for free. So you get 2,000 of these material, and it helps a lot in the long run. I think by the time a new Titanos is released, you can farm the previous Titanos to about level 160 or even level 170. And once you reach that point, you can either choose to focus on the new Titanos or slowly max the old Titanos. But in my personal preference, I would just choose to work on the new Titanos, because every Titanos, I think they have their own place in the meta. Before I move on to Windstrider, one thing I forgot to mention is the meta of Titanos stacking. Prior to Season 6, you have a strategy when you're doing rallies where your top players would send their Odin it doesn't really matter how strong the Odin is, as long as like over level 100. But the important part is to stack 5 Odins. When you stack 5 Odins, what happens is that when the battle initiates, your Titanos would hit simultaneously. So instead of 1 hit landing, you will hit 5 times. And in this case, because Odin attacks 3 times, you will hit 15 times. And that deals a lot of damage to the enemy front lines. And Titanos stacking really starts to shine from Season 3, from Odin. And Titanos stacking really becomes broken once Windstrider is introduced, because Windstrider, his skill, if we look at it here, what is different between Windstrider's skill and Odin's skill? His first skill deals 60% damage to all enemy troops within the battlefield, and this actually targets all troop types, so the infantry, the cavalry, and especially the archer. So when you're stacking 5 Windstriders against an enemy rally, his archer would die instantly, almost instantly. And this is a really powerful setup because yeah, there's not really much more to say about it aside from absolutely destroying your enemy archer. And because in Season 5, you have the Michael meta, and Michael suppresses the infantry as well as the cavalry, because his his rage skill confers a 90% damage down for the duration that it lasts, which is about 6 seconds, I think, or maybe 9 seconds. Let's take a look. So this is a very powerful skill. Yeah, 9 seconds. Holy damn. That reduces the damage dealt by 90%. It says 70%, but it's actually 85%. And once you awaken it, it becomes 90%. So yeah, it's a really powerful skill. And what this means is that in Season 5, the archer does a lot of work, because your infantry and cavalry are kind of crippled by that Michael's skill. And so if your archer starts dying from the Windstrider stack, then you pretty much have no chance of winning anymore, because you have no more archer, no more source of incoming damage, and you're pretty much dead. Your opponent's archer, if you're not stacking Windstriders and your opponent's archer is still alive, then your opponent archer will absolutely demolish your Michael or Kellerman with Michael armor, whatever it is, and you'll just die straight up. So Windstrider, I wouldn't necessarily say it's worth maxing, because the damage dealt by the Titanos is not increased significantly by the skill level. Like, I think each level only confers a 2% increase to this damage dealt. So I think once the skill hits level 10, your Windstrider is completely fine. A level 110, level 120 Windstrider will not necessarily perform much worse than a fully resonated maxed Titanos, maxed Windstrider in terms of rage skill damage. His second skill is to increase all troops' rage skill damage by 10% for 15 seconds. Now this is quite good, except that if your Hanzo or Lisbeth is dead by the Titanos stack, then this skill absolutely does nothing. His third skill is to increase scout speed by 100% and expedition capacity by 6,000. Now the expedition capacity is really, really good, I think. So if you are not a big whale, if you are free to play, of course, if you are free to play, you cannot get Windstrider for a long time. But if you're a low spender, I would slowly work on Windstrider through the discount packs and just hunt for that expedition capacity, because it's really, really good. Yeah, but really the meta for Windstrider lasts for Season 5 only. And the meta is Windstrider stacking. But after Season 5, Windstrider stacking is no more. And that is because Horn God gets introduced. And Horn God has this special skill called damage reduction, natural order. So increase the final HP of all your troops by 300% and reduce their skill damage taken by 80% for 9 seconds. And Horn God really likes to spam this skill. But what this means is that once this skill is active, your Titanos damage will go down to almost 0. So within a rally report, say you look at a rally report, you will see maybe the Windstrider doing like this is the Titanos damage. This is a very useful page where you can go into it and compare the damage that different Titanos is dealing upon the enemy march or enemy rally defense. And one thing you will notice is that in Season 5, Windstrider stacking will do a huge amount of damage. So if the enemy was running, say, a 2 million rally, then Windstrider stacking may just end up doing over 1 million kills. Like, yeah. It's probably going to kill over 1 million troops, especially if your opponent is running a lot of archers. But the moment Season 6 hits and people start running Horn God, your Windstrider damage will go from 1 million down to probably under 50,000. So it is at least a 20-fold reduction, and this is primarily attributed to that rage skill of Horn God, which not only boosts the tankiness of all troop types, but also reduces the damage taken, in particular by this skill. So if you want to rush Windstrider, if you're you want to resonate Windstrider, just keep in mind that Windstrider only dominates in Season 5. And after that, Windstrider is only really there for stats. Although it has seen a little bit of coming back now in Season 7, where people are running Leona, which is a very powerful archer. However, Leona does not have the protection that Horn God provides, and therefore the Titanos that can hit the backline, which is primarily Windstrider as well as Celestial Stag, they're seeing a little bit of comeback, but they are definitely not as meta-defining as Windstrider was back in Season 5. Now we move on to Season 6, Chaos. And overall, my impressions of Chaos is rather lackluster. I think Chaos is really just there for stats and stats only. And yeah, I'm not even that big of a fan of Chaos, I think. I think overall, within the context of each season, Chaos is probably the least impactful of all Titanos that has been released, with the exception of possibly Nightsaber and Bloodshade. Well, Nightsaber is actually very relevant because especially if you're in arena and you're a whale and you want to win in arena, it's much better to have one of your teams boosted by a resonated Nightsaber than like a resonated Bloodshade. So the problem with Chaos is mostly its skills. And its skills really doesn't give it any benefit, like it doesn't give it any additional value. So his first skill is to deal 70% damage to all enemy troops within a battlefield. Now 70% might seem like a lot, because if we compare to Windstrider, this skill also seems to be able to hit every enemy troop type. But unfortunately, it's very slow acting. I'm not too sure how to exactly describe it, but it just doesn't seem to have much impact as Windstrider's first skill. But because this dragon is released in Season 6, this skill will actually see almost next to no effect, because yeah, Horn God's protection, it renders this skill completely useless. The second skill is to reduce all enemies' troops' rage skill damage by 10% until the end of battle. Yeah, I just really don't think this skill is anything special within the context of Season 6. Like a lot of, I guess I should give an explanation. So a lot of damage within Season 6 and possibly also Season 7 does not necessarily come from the rage skill. It comes from the passive skills. And I do not think that those passive skills are defined as rage skill. So this skill is likely to not affect those passive skill at all. And what I mean by passive skill is, for example, we have skill 5 here. In battle, enemy archer and cavalry units take 300% damage every 3 seconds until the end of battle. This is not a rage skill. However, this skill deals massive damage to the cavalry and also the archer. So this skill is probably not affected by Chaos's skill 2. And finally, moving on to Chaos's skill 3, it's just so useless. So the effect is that march speed increases by 20% and rally capacity increases by 50,000. Now, an increase in march speed might seem very impactful on the surface, because everyone knows that when you're trying to attack an opponent, it takes quite a while for the troops to actually march to your opponent's castle, your opponent's defense, or whatever. However, the march speed actually indicates the speed from like fighting it's just PvE, to put it in a nutshell. March speed refers to PvE only. And this is not influenced at all in PvP. So yeah, you're boosting 20% towards absolutely nothing. Like, who cares about farming tiles or doing your daily quests? Like, your marches are already fast enough. So the 20%, I'm not too sure whether this is intentionally made by the devs, maybe a little deceptive, but it's just very useless because it's only applied towards PvE. And by the way, this is also true for the evil depths that the alliances can control. You can control up to 60% march speed, but all of that is PvE. Otherwise, it would be incredibly powerful and everyone would be going for that. And finally, the 50,000 rally capacity, that's nice, but it's nothing meaningful because by this time, people already have almost 2 million rally capacity. And one thing I should point out about rallying is that a bigger rally size does not necessarily mean a stronger rally. If a lot of a lot of weaker players join your rally, for example, then just a few very strong players sitting in a defense, like say under 600,000 troop defense, they can absolutely demolish your 2 million sized rally if your rally is supported by a bunch of weaker players. So yeah. A bigger rally does not necessarily mean a stronger rally. Yeah, overall, I would say just slowly work on Chaos, summon him. There's really no, it doesn't hurt to slowly raise him over time because, at least in my personal opinion, it's fairly cheap, especially for Wells. Just slowly raise Chaos. Like the stats, they are just here. Like everyone can take a look at the max stats. I don't really think they are much of an improvement over Windstrider. And his skills don't really do any additional damage compared to Windstrider. So I think in the context of Season 5 or Season 6 PvP, I would be running Windstrider, Odin, and maybe my maxed Moonbane, which I wisely maxed back in Season 1. So something like that. I don't think really Chaos adds anything new to the meta. Now, finally, we can review the Celestial Stag. And stat-wise, wow, wait, I just want to quickly check. Okay, stat-wise, the Celestial Stag appears to be a decent boost over Chaos. And it might be worth maxing, especially if you skip out on Chaos. So if you skip on Chaos, then it's probably worth resonating the Celestial Stag if you are a relatively big well. So looking at its skills, its first skill deals 9 instances of damage to all enemy troops within the battlefield, with each instance dealing 10% damage. I think just based on practical performance, I think this skill is quite nice, and it's comparable to Windstrider's skill, a bit stronger. And I say it's quite nice because, as I mentioned earlier, the meta in Season 7 has shifted slightly, so Leona is now kind of the dominating archer, although many people are still running Horn God or an Arma alternative. Its second skill is fairly interesting. In battle, it increases the defense of all your troops by 50% and reduces the rage skill damage taken against all your troops by 12%. So the 50% seems nice, but it is most likely just an additive buff. However, once again, in the Battle of Disorder, this skill might have a bit different impact. So we will find that out once more people have relatively higher leveled Celestial Stag used in the Battle Disorder. But for now, this skill, it just looks nice, but I don't really think it is that impactful outside of the Battle Disorder. And its third skill, I think the third skill is really, really nice because it increases your march capacity by 12,000. And to give you a comparison and explanation of why I think this is really nice is simply a factor of cost. Because if you look at tier 12, for example, tier 12 part of the power boost coming from tier 12 is the increase in march capacity. And that increases your march capacity by 36,000. But think of the investment that you need to actually increase that capacity by 36,000. You need to put in about $1,400 to actually max T12 with relatively fast speed. And to max this Titanos within a month, it will only cost you about $2,200. So compared to $14,000, it is definitely cheaper to increase the march capacity by a third of what you get from T12 with about a sixth of the cost. So yeah, I think this is a very good skill. And for big whales, resonating this Titanos is certainly, I think, a viable option, especially if more people are running Leona. I think nobody has tried this yet, but I think with the upcoming Holy Mountain battles, I think we will see people start to stack Celestial Stags, and we'll really be able to see the performance of this Titanos against the backline archer. And I'm really excited to see that actually. Stat-wise, once again, I think it is a decent boost over Chaos and especially decent boost over Windstrider. So resonating this Titanos is definitely an option. But for those not interested in resonating this Titanos, I think that working this Titanos slowly all the way up to the full-fledged form, which I really don't think is that expensive, gives you a very good stat boost. And this is really the reason why I have not resonated any single Titanos with the exception of Moonbane. And it's really because the stats simply outscale each other. For example, if we take a look at the resonated Moonbane, the stats are actually comparable to a non-resonated Celestial Stag. So if you are patient enough to wait a few months, then you will be saving I think resonating costs $300 or $200. I think it's $200 to $300. You'll be saving $200 to $300 across each Titanos while not losing so much on the performance. Except for Moonbane. I think Moonbane, especially for newer whales, it is an absolute must when it comes to resonating. So yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed this review video of the 7 different Titanos. I think overall in the meta, Moonbane and Odin are probably the most meta defining, simply because Moonbane confers the player an incredible amount of stats for the early game, and there's simply no viable alternative except Bloodshade, which is absolute horseshit. And Odin, which appears to have very, very good performance in the Battle Disorder, and also provides all 4 different stat types before it reaches the resonated stage. So it is a very good Titanos across players of all spending levels. And yeah, I would really recommend getting Odin. I know personally I'm still using Odin in the Battle Disorder. He's being very useful for me. And yeah, all the other Titanos, I would say Nightsaber and Chaos are definitely the weakest or the least impactful. Windstrider is not that impactful within Season 5, but is super meta defining within its own season. And finally, Celestial Stag. I think this is a very good Titanos overall, especially attributed to its skills 3. And yeah, I would say that the Celestial Stag is probably the best Titanos to invest in below Odin and Moonbane, if you're in the respective season, obviously. If you are in Season 6 and you don't have resonated Moonbane, obviously do not resonate it, because Moonbane is a Season 1 Titanos. So if you are past the Season 1, and I really emphasize this, if you are past season the respective season and you have not resonated the respective Titanos, then forget about it. Just save your money, use it for the newer Titanos, because the newer Titanos will almost always be better at the same level. Maybe with the exception of Chaos, because I really don't know where this Titanos fits in the meta. So I hope everyone enjoyed my Titanos review video. And I'll see everyone in my next video. Oh, one last thing that I should mention is that the Titanos costs goes up from Moonbane to Nightsaber, about 30%, I think. And it goes up another 30% from Nightsaber to Odin, I think. This might be old information, so please correct me if I'm wrong on that. But after Odin, all Titanos cost exactly the same. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I'll see everyone in my next video. Take care.